Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Kristina Schmitt. Today, I am a little bit geeked out about my guest today because I have been following her for probably 5 years or more, and she has helped me get my home under control. She's even helped me in my work, both doing some lean manufacturing things as well as just how I think about how I work as well. And so she has so much to share with you. And I cannot wait to introduce her to you. So today, my guest is Dana K. White. Dana is an author, speaker, podcaster, YouTuber, creator of the No Mess Decluttering process, and my lovely guest today. And a decluttering expert. So welcome, Dana, to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is fun. I love talking business.
Awesome. I'm so excited. Really, just to get started. So in case people aren't aware of who you are, why don't you give us just a quick overview of like where you're from, that sort of thing, and a little bit about what you do.
So I am Dana K. White. I always put the K in there because if you just Google Dana White, you're not going to get me. You're going to get a bald-headed man who runs the UFC. And like you said, I'm an author. I'm a podcaster. I am a YouTuber, and I do all the things. My whole goal was to be an author. That was the thing I wanted to do. I wanted to write. And so because I wanted to write, I learned what blogging was back in the day and thought I need to have that. But my house was such a wreck that I thought, okay, this will be one more thing that keeps me from figuring out my house, because I'd been trying to figure out my house my whole life. Like my spaces, every space I'd ever lived in was a mess. And so I started writing about that anonymously, thinking it was temporary, because that was going to be my way to learn about writing and kind of get some practice at the same time as using it as a way to stay focused on my home. My plan was to figure out my house in a couple months, right? And then start doing, get rid of that blog and then start writing about something else. And that was in 2009. It's 2025. It's been 16 years. I know. I do use my real name now. It was a fake name in the beginning because I didn't want anyone to ever know it was me that was making these horrible confessions on the internet. But yeah, this has turned into the thing I write about because I thought it was just me in the beginning. And so I was just going to use it as a way to stay focused, thinking, well, maybe somebody would find it interesting kind of as a voyeur or whatever. Ooh, how would somebody get their house under control? But turns out there's a lot of people whose brains work like mine. And that was actually the missing piece in the market was, most people who talk about this talk about it because they like it and it comes naturally to them. And so they think it's fun to talk about. I was only talking about it because it is the opposite of natural for me. And so, it took me a long time to accept that, I do have something to teach. I can't tell you how to have a perfect house, but I can tell you how to go from I'm completely and totally overwhelmed. I don't know why this is hard when it seems like it's easy for the rest of the world to, I get it now. I can do this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's how I came across you. I was following another decluttering expert, and it was just like, I was like, I just can't do that. I can't operate the way she's operating. And somebody in one of the comments on the Facebook page was like, someone should check out a Slob Comes Clean. And I was like, okay. And I was like, it was a complete, like you were speaking within my brain, which was just amazing. But just the thing I want to pull out of that is that everybody functions differently. And like as a leader, you're going to have team members that will function not the same way as you, or even if you're struggling with something, maybe you're just not approaching it well. So
yeah, my passion now is to share the game-changing truth, which my editors are always like, stop saying game-changing so much. But I'm like, it's true though. But I thought I had to be a different person to be successful at this. Mm-hmm. So I thought that the solution was to change who I am. Mm-hmm. That was why I consistently failed, because I was trying to do things the way that other people who are different from me said they were supposed to be done. Mm-hmm. And what I needed to do, what actually ended up changing things for me, was letting myself accept how I am and how I work and working with that. And so accepting myself is not the same thing as accepting the thing I don't want to accept. Accepting myself let me change the thing I wanted to change.
Yes.
It's better to accept who I am and how my brain works and go with that than it is to try to be a different person.
Yes. So how did you make that shift? Because so many times I think we beat ourselves up because we're the wrong person. We're not functioning the way we should function. So how did you come across that?
I think it was that I was writing about it as I was doing things, right? And a lot of it honestly came from the fact that the nature of blogging, what it was back in the day, where it was much more of a journaling type of a thing, right?
Mhm.
The nature of blogging is that you get immediate feedback, which you don't get that writing books. But so I feel like it's, even though, yes, my goal was to write books, I now write books. I'm so thankful for the opportunity. I'm like, I am here because of the way that I did things in those days, because I was getting that feedback from people and they were telling me this is how my brain works. And so it was shocking to me that I wasn't the only one. And what I saw was that the people who said, I think the way that you think, I operate the way that you operate. When, back in the early days, you would click on their name and be like, oh my goodness, who is this person? And they would have a Google profile or whatever for Blogger. And I would see that the people who said they related to the way I think were highly creative people. And they were artists and poets and musicians and lots of theater teachers. I had been a theater teacher. And it's not always that kind of creative. I mean, now I understand that a lot of times it's mathematicians and scientists and, people who think differently, right? Like they just kind of don't see exactly what's in front of them. They see beyond that and they see it in a different way. And when I started to see that the people whose brains worked like mine were also creative type people, I realized this is how my brain works. It is not that I need to be like them. This is actually this struggle that I don't love about myself. Like I'm not like, hey, let me be a slob. No, the whole point was to try to not be one, right? So this struggle that I have is actually part of how my brain works, related to the creative side of my brain, which I'm very thankful for. Like I say, thank you, God, for making me creative. And I'm like, well, if the messy tendencies go along with that, then if I'm going to accept that this is how my brain works, then I accept that that's a struggle as well, that it's like part of it. And somehow that helped me go, okay, that I'm not to say this is, oh, well, my house is messy because it's how I am. Instead to go, okay, well, if my brain works differently from naturally organized people, then it would make sense that I need to think of things and do things in a way that works for my brain, because the way that they're, teaching is what works for their brain.
Yes, exactly. And I think accepting that can be just incredibly freeing.
Oh, so freeing.
Yeah. It takes away all this guilt and shame. And it's
Yeah.
like, now I'm proud of who I am, because we have to take those good and the bad all together.
Right. Right. And I think too, sometimes when people hear that, they get caught up on the, I already said it, but I just want to reiterate, like it was never a matter of me saying, oh, well, that's just the way I am, so I'm not going to worry about the mess, because I did not want the mess, right? Like I did not want it. I wanted to change my home. But accepting how my brain works gave me the freedom to move forward in a way that actually worked for me, as opposed to all the times I had tried other things and then it would fail. And I would be like, okay, but I got to keep trying that same way and keep trying that way, because that's what the people whose houses are under control say is supposed to work, and then it kept on failing.
Yeah. So basically, it's not an excuse. It's not an excuse to
No.
be lazy or to do it poorly. I talk about this a lot because I do the 6 types of working genius. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I have heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I use that in my work a lot. And it is like I'm very low in tenacity. You can believe that. But it's not an excuse to not do those tenacity style jobs, like cleaning my house or, finishing anything. But it is just, now I have an understanding. I can name it and I can now do something differently. Or in your case, realize my brain is functioning differently and I just need to do something different. I have to put strategies in place that work.
Right.
So awesome. So my background is manufacturing. I'm an engineer. So if that feeds in.
Yes. That's what I'm talking about, because it's funny, because sometimes in the beginning, I would be like, oh my goodness, it's because I'm creative. And some people are like, well, I'm not creative, which I never believe that about anybody. I think everybody has their own type of creativity. But the engineering brain, is highly creative. I mean, that's part of it. You may think that, oh, wait, am I? But yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So
Yeah.
we like processes in engineering.
Mhm.
So could you go through your 5-step decluttering
Yes.
process? And I just
Yes.
want to call out to all my lean manufacturing, lean gurus. Listen to this. It might replace your 5 S's. So just listen.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So the first step is trash, which the problem was I would look at a cluttered space and feel completely overwhelmed and shut down. And so I had to have a way to get started. And trash is the easiest of the easy stuff. It's completely decision free. So when I say trash, I mean obvious trash, not deciding if this thing is trash, not debating with yourself that my mother would call this trash, but I don't think it's trash, which is a big thing with creative people because we see things that other people see as trash as possibilities, right? Yeah, exactly. Like it's my treasure. So instead I'm just at this point in the process, I am literally just saying, if there's any trash, I'm going to stick it in the trash bag or the recycling bin if I've already got one. And what that does is it takes the overall mess that's overwhelming to me and it reduces it a little bit. And so it's less overwhelming. Also, my brain, as I'm looking for obvious trash, I'm seeing what else is in this space where before it was a pile and I didn't know what the individual items were. And so my brain is starting to adjust to what I'm going to have to deal with down in the future, in the future down the line. So I make immediate progress. It gets me moving and the mess shrinks a little bit. And then the second step is the easy stuff. Easy stuff is anything that already has an established home. I don't have to ask myself questions. I don't have to analyze. I am just saying, is there anything in here that I already know what to do with? If there is, I'm going to take it immediately to where it goes, where I already know that it has an established home. I'm not at this point, really at any point in my process, I am not stopping to analyze, why is it here instead of there? What was I thinking? We take all that out, right? And we just say, okay, what's easy? I'm going to get that out. Again, every time I walk back to this space after taking something easy to its home, this space is a little bit better, a little bit less overwhelming, and I've made real progress. Another thing here too is that as I'm looking for trash and easy stuff, I am not pulling everything out and then searching for that stuff. I am only dealing with what I can see and access without pulling everything out. Okay. Yeah. So step 3 is obvious donations. So I'm just asking myself the question, is there anything in here that I already know should go straight into the donate box without having to ask myself questions or analyze or anything like that? Because again, for everything that leaves, it clarifies my actual problem so much more. So, I mean, like I'm seeing what I'm dealing with and I'm getting out as much as I can. Those first 3 steps have no emotional energy spent and no decisions made. So if I find myself going, oh no, I can't figure out what's an obvious donation, well, then it's not an obvious donation. So, like move on to the next step because you're going to deal with every last thing with the last 2 steps. So the 4th step is to ask my 2 decluttering questions. First question is, if I needed this item, where would I look for it first? Which is an instinct-based question. It is not an analysis question because analysis lets me spin out into the where should something go? Where's the best place for this to live? Where do I use it? Will I use it in this place and that place and this? All these things run through my brain. And so I had to have a way to definitively just answer the question. If I needed this item, I'm only asking this about stuff that I don't know where it goes. If I knew where it went, it left in step 2, the easy stuff that already had an established home. This is literally those things like I get down to the end and I don't know where pencils go. I don't have a place for pencils. Okay, so you might have a place for pencils, but it's just what was in front of me, right? Okay, so if I needed a yellow pencil, where would I look for it first? I'm picturing myself not knowing that it's going to be there, but looking for it. Even if I think this is the beginning of a 3-hour search tearing my house apart looking for a pencil, okay? What's the first drawer I would open, the first shelf I would look on, the first cabinet? Where would I walk in my home to look for that? And then, like you said, the take it there now, okay? If I can answer that first question, I take it there now. This is the biggest difference between my process and any other decluttering process that's recommended by the experts who are naturally gifted in this area, right? So my biggest frustration was that every time I tried to declutter, I ended up creating a bigger mess first. I thought, because people said this was true, I thought that it had to get worse before it got better. My problem was it would get worse and then I would shut down because it was worse and I was overwhelmed and things were in piles everywhere, or life would happen. I have kids. They're not at home anymore. They're grown now. But at the time that I was developing this process, they were like 3, 5, and 7. That is a time of life where you work on a project, you have no guarantee of how long you're going to be able to be there. So even though it made more sense to make piles of things to do later, I knew that that backfired for me basically every single time. And so I decided to take it there now and not make piles. So I'm going one item at a time. If I needed this item, where would I look for it first? I say, well, I would look for this in the drawer in the garage. And so I would walk all the way to the garage and put it in that drawer right now, so that when I get distracted, I've only made progress. I've never created a bigger mess, which also means I can stop at any time, which knowing I'm going to be able to stop at any time is the thing that lets me start, because I am not making this huge commitment to, I can't do anything else for 3 days. I've got to work on this project until I finish it. It's like, no, well, that's actually what changed my home, was being willing to get started. The other thing that happens when I take it there now is I face the reality of that space. When I was making piles of things that were gonna go into that drawer in the garage, I had no idea what that drawer looked like. In my head, it wasn't that bad. Once I got there, I realized, oh, this thing that I say I would look for there, I've got 17 of them already. Like, here's my 3-hole punch, right? And I'm take it there now, and there's 5 other 3-hole punches. And that's a reality check for me to realize that if I get there, and maybe it's not that there's others of that same item, but that space is its own mess, then I ask myself, okay, well, what am I willing to get rid of to make the space for this item? Ideally, trash or an obvious donation, because that takes me back to the place I was originally decluttering. But that's how I move my whole house forward. You know, I call that like net gains decluttering. Like that's how I change my home, instead of doing what I used to do, which is just stuff shifting. Like, oh, okay, I don't know, I'll stick it over here. Okay, I'll stick this over here. And then everything just kind of floats around and all that. So this is the very short version of what I've written like endlessly about. So if I can't answer that question though, where would I look for it first? Then I ask the question, if I needed this item, would it occur to me that I already had one? Meaning I didn't have a place where I would look for it, because I wouldn't even think to look for it. At that point, I need to stick it in the donate box, because the truth is, even though I'm holding it in my hand right now, if I wouldn't have gone looking for it, I would have gone out and bought another one. I'm trying to declutter. That's one of the reasons I had so much clutter, is because things didn't have homes and I was so overwhelmed and I forgot what I had, and I would just rebuy things that I already had. And so I had to stop that endless cycle and just donate. If I insist that I would go looking for it, then there has to be a place where I would look for it first. And I go back to that question and go with that instinct. And then the 5th step is to implement the container concept, which is space is finite. Containers are not for putting things in, like I always thought. They're actually meant to serve as limits. My mind was blown by that. They're meant to contain, right? And when I realized that a container is meant to contain, it actually took so much of the pressure off for me, because I was not making value decisions about whether this is a good pencil. Instead, I just said, well, this is the space that I have for pencils. So does this deserve space in that spot over other pencils? And that helps naturally sort out the ones that you're like, well, technically I could use this in a pinch. You know, I'd have to like find a special thing, or it's down to the nub or whatever. But it's like, oh, but if I accept the reality that that space is limited, then I realize, okay, if I have a pencil this long and a pencil this long, and there's only room for one of them, I'm going to keep this one, you know, and it takes so much of that pressure off on that. And so that step is basically, at this point, everything that's in this space is something I would look for here. But if there's still too much, I'm going to remove my least favorites or least important ones until what is left fits. And so all through that process, I'm never making piles. I'm never pulling everything out. I'm just going one item at a time, final decision by final decision, which the steps talk you through those final decisions, and acting on those final decisions, which means I'm only making progress. So progress and only progress changed everything for me.
It builds that momentum. It gets you
Yes.
moving, and you see better.
Yes. And it's worth my time. If I know I'm only going to make progress, I know that any effort I put forth will be worth my time. Where before, I thought the first step was to pull everything out, and then it always backfired. And so then I really questioned, why do I even bother? It never goes well. I never end up making real progress, because I'd end up having to shove everything back in the space, and where I kind of knew where things were before, now it's a complete jumbled mess.
Yeah. Yeah. So I find like that philosophy around that progress. I stole this from you, but the progress,
It's
not
okay.
perfection.
No, actually, that's not me. People always quote me saying that, and I'm like, I have purposely not said that. I think that is Fly Lady, and I always try to not like take other people's quotes or whatever, and so I purposely don't. But you're right. I mean, it's the concept, right? Yeah.
But even like when you talk about like self development or development in
Mhm.
your team or even business improvements, you have to keep that philosophy in mind because if you're
Yes.
trying to go from 0 to 60, every change that you make,
Yeah.
it, you will just say it's not worth it, or we don't have,
Yes.
we can't shut down for 2 weeks to make this work. But it's like if you're using some element of this, like the take
Yeah.
it there now, the steps, like the very small steps that you're progressing forward and making everything slightly better. Now you
Mhm.
actually see the progress. People are more motivated because
Yes.
if a goal is too big, I'm very unmotivated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people like that in the world. So very small steps, and that helps people see that so much.
Well, and that's why the 5 steps is like I didn't make these, like they're what I actually just figured out in my own home, right? And sometimes I think people don't understand that. No, I use these 5 steps all the time, and I need them because I'm like, I'm overwhelmed again. Go back to the step. Go back to the step because I know if I will do this step, I will make real legitimate progress.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always call it unbacktrackable progress.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Try not to steal that from me.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
But I have been impacted, and I think that the world can be impacted by like your take it there now, your
Mhm.
small steps, and your habit creation. And I
Mhm.
know that we haven't talked about that part yet, but
Yeah.
we will get there.
Yeah.
But just a huge impact there. And I want to share a story. I used to work in manufacturing, in lean manufacturing. So there's this little, I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's this lean concept called 5S. And the big part of 5S, it is essentially cleaning and organizing. Like it really is.
Okay.
Great standards and containers. This is where the 5 steps. So I used to do this with clients sometimes when they would need it just to help them out. But we would all, like everybody, would just get overwhelmed because the whole lesson was to put it in these piles. I use this sometimes, all the time, and then you put it all back later. And it's like,
Mhm.
well, that takes so much time. So I like my last stint with this one company, and it was like we just knew we were going to do this one more thing, and it was like I
Mhm.
started using your take it there now concept,
Mhm.
and it was so incredibly powerful because they would always just like they could not make these decisions. Like the leaders of the organization did not want to make these decisions of throw it away or not throw it away. So I used some of your questions, and I was like,
Mhm.
it was mind boggling for them to just be able to. And then they were like, and there's no mess to clean up afterwards. I was like, I know, it's amazing. We don't have to take anywhere because
I
we
love
get
it.
there already. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so it's very powerful in business and at home, and just take it there now. I tell you.
I love it. I'm going to totally not make you. I can't make you do anything. But my next book is about procrastination. And so I've put it into, I mean, it won't come out for another year, but I said that on my video yesterday, a couple days ago. People were like, haha, your book about procrastination won't come out for a year. I'm like, that's how books work. It's not good. But they thought that was funny. And I was like, no, I did have to ask for an extension. It's the first time I've ever asked for an extension on a book deadline. And it was a book about procrastination. That's funny. Right. But yeah, because it's that knowing I can make progress is the most freeing thing that lets me get started. So, yeah.
Yes. Having that tiny step. Like
Yeah.
we often say that it's so small you could trip over it.
Yeah.
Like something like that. And I think, I don't know, I've heard you talk about it, but that you don't know what the pile is.
Yeah.
Once you start going through the pile, now you actually know what it is. So it has less fear about it.
Yes.
Fear around the unknown. So there's huge things.
Exactly.
Like so much about procrastination. Sorry to.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, and that's the reason I wrote a book about procrastination is that I realized that's what I've been teaching all along is how to break through that, oh my goodness, I'm overwhelmed, feeling and make real progress.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a big part is you have this beautiful process, but such a big part of it is how you help people with it because there are so many things that get in our way that we block ourselves, like the procrastination and like everything else. So like talk about that a little bit. Like how do you help people, or what sorts of things come up when you're working with people?
Yeah. I think, and I don't want to say this like I know people can take it wrong, so I want to make sure I say it carefully, but like it is so normal to think my situation is different. And it is. It's your situation is unique to you. But I think that the tendency when you do have extenuating circumstances, you have health issues, you have attention issues, you have neurodivergence, you have, just situations that are really challenging. It is very normal to think, okay, my situation is so different that there must not be a solution that would actually work for me. And it will. Like that's my point of the no mess process is it's not adaptable in that you change the steps. It's adaptable in that you figure out what does this step mean in my unique situation. How does the step work in this scenario? It's the same step. Like everybody, like if you have a messy space, whether that messy space is because a flood went through your town and it's, or you have a messy space because you moved into your grandmother's home and she was a hoarder, or you personally struggle with hoarding disorder, like whatever the situation is, obvious trash is obvious trash, right? And the obvious part is what makes it work for your unique situation. Because this process does not involve arguments over what is trash. And I think that is when people can understand that, when they can understand that, I did a podcast, I don't know, it's been several months ago probably, about somebody had said, well, I really struggle with obvious donations. And I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I'm like, it's actually not possible to struggle with obvious donations. Because if you're struggling, it's not obvious, you get to move to the next step. So there's still value in looking for trash, even if you don't identify any trash, even if there are piles of trash and you can't identify any of it as trash, there's still value in looking for obvious trash because of the fact that you're looking and you're actually not avoiding that pile anymore. The fact that you're looking, it has a building thing. And then if you can get anything out in those first 3 steps, great. If you can't, those 2 decluttering questions are there for you. And you can literally pick up anything and ask yourself that question and then go through the process. So like, I did a podcast with somebody who had been, had a team come in to help her in her home, with the hoarding disorder. And she had a lot of experience, people trying to help her. And yet she finally found success using my 5-step process. And she said, I can't identify trash. I can't identify trash, but I can pick up a used gum wrapper and ask myself, if I needed a used gum wrapper, where would I look for it first? And then my brain goes, I wouldn't look for it. It would be in the trash. And then she was able to do that. So it's like, but even if you have that, even if your answer is, I would look for a used gum wrapper in my craft stuff because it's silver and you could totally somehow cover something with that, an acorn. You could cover an acorn. You could decoupage a silver gum wrapper on an acorn and make a Thanksgiving soup tureen out of it for gravy. I mean, like, that's how my brain works, right? And so, but my brain working that way meant that my house was a disaster if I didn't have a process. Well, the process allows me to say, I would look for this gum wrapper in the place where I do my miniature crafts. Okay, take it there right now. As the person either leading you through the process or the process itself, I am not going to say, you shouldn't do that. There's no reason for that, which a lot of people who try to help people declutter say that, right? They will say things like, absolutely not. You're never going to do that, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's so hurtful and offensive to me as the creative person. And so instead of saying, absolutely not, that doesn't make any sense, you need to just throw it away, which stops the process and prevents the progress. Instead, I say, okay, let's take it there right now. Now, sometimes people are like, I don't want to take it. Well, but that's the process. So we take it there right now. And we find out that you have a huge corner of this room where you say you would look for it first that is piled up with things like used gum wrappers. Okay. All right. Well, which one are you willing to get rid of in order to keep this gum wrapper? Is this gum wrapper good enough to keep instead of the water bottle cap that you had this, some other idea? Like we go through that process instead of it being a thing. And then they are the ones facing reality.
Don't you just love cliffhangers? So if you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to come back for the rest of the conversation on next week's episode. Have a great week. Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit KristinaSchmitt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.